Hey, what's up everyone? In this video, we will learn how to do scripting in Postman. So learning scripting will give you the power to automate your API collections. So it's really important for you to understand how scripting works if you want to do API automation using Postman. So let's get started and talk about what is Postman scripting. So Postman scripting allows you to add dynamic behavior to request and collections by executing JavaScript code. And we will get to the dynamic behavior part in a bit. So essentially what you are doing is using JavaScript code to manipulate your API request. So there are two types of scripting you can do with Postman. You have the pre-request scripts as well as the test script. So the way the pre-request script works is you manipulate the data of the request before Postman sends the request. And for your test script, you're validating the response of the request by writing test, and this gets executed after Postman receives the response. So the key thing to remember here is for pre-request, you are manipulating the data before Postman sends the request. So this is basically before you hit that send button on Postman. And for your test script, this is happening after you get the response back. So you have hit the send button, you got the response back, and after that, it's actually validating the response. So the key here is obviously for your test script, it's validating the response, but for your pre-request scripts, it's actually manipulating the data of that particular script. So I mentioned dynamic behavior, as well as I mentioned that you can manipulate the data. So what exactly do I mean by that? Well, to answer that, let's take a look at what exactly can Postman scripts do. So what can you do with the scripts? So you can set or get the variable values, or you can set or get the parameters or the header or the body data. You can also log output to the console. So this will help you with your debugging. And we will look into that why that would be helpful later on. But basically using the help of scripts, you're able to dynamically get the data or set the data and put that directly into your request. Now all of this comes really helpful when you start running a collection. So when you're running a collection, at that point you don't really have access to just change a script in the middle. You cannot really stop a script and say, okay, I need the ID from here, or I need that particular parameter from this side. What you can do instead is you can create the scripts which will dynamically send data from one request to another request, or basically receive the data from one request to another request. So let's take a look at an example. So let's say if you're creating a user using the post user request, and if you want to get the ID for that particular user. So in this scenario, so far what we have been doing is we create the user, we get the response back, and the response we have the ID. We copy that ID and then we go to another tab. From there, we would do a get on the user ID using the ID that we just copied from our post user. So this is fine to do if you're manually basically doing API request. But when you're actually automating this, at that point, you don't really have an option to basically copy paste your ID from one request to another request. So that's where scripts will come to play. So what you can do is you can set a variable ID, which you will get from your post user response, and put that in your test script. So the test script, if you remember, happens after you receive the response. And then what you can do is in your get user ID, you can create a pre-request script. Now what that pre-request script is doing is it's getting the variable ID. So it's searching for a variable called ID, and then it's setting that in the parameter. So now when you're running a collection, what's happening is you will run post user. The post user will have a response. Then it will see, oh, okay, there is a script, basically a test script there. That test script is actually setting a variable called ID, which it receives from the response. And then it moves on to the second request, which is the get user ID. At that point, it does not know what the ID is, but before hitting the send button, it will take a look at the pre-request script. And it knows that in the pre-request script, it is getting a variable ID and it's setting that in the parameter. So by the time it's actually hitting the request, it knows, okay, this is the ID that it's trying to get from the previous request. It will copy paste that over there automatically without you having to do anything. And then it will put that in your API request and send that in. So what that will do is basically you will get the user ID response for the user that you just created. So that's the advantage of using scripts. Now each of the scripts have an order of execution. So let's take a look at how that works. So a pre-request script is associated with the request and it will execute before the request is sent. Like I mentioned, that this pre-request script is actually executing before the request is sent. And then you get your response there. And after the response, it will execute the test script. So if you look at our previous example, if you notice what we did was for our post user, we started from here. We created a request test script where we actually stored the ID. And then we moved on to our second test where we used the pre-request script to actually get that ID. And then we moved on with the rest of our request. Now you can have scripts on collection as well as folder levels too, which will have its own order of execution. So let's take a look at that. Alright, I know this looks daunting, but let's break this down. So for every request in collections, script will execute in the following order. So you have your pre-request script associated with your collection, which will run prior to every request in the collection. So all the requests that you have in that collection, first of all, the very first thing will run is this pre-request script. Then your folder level pre-request script will run, and after that, your request pre-request script will run. So you have to just remember this is how the order of collection execution works. Now, same thing with the actual response test script. The way that would work is a test script associated with the collection will run after every request in the collection. So basically, once the request is completed, you have your collection test script that will run. After that, your folder test script will run, and then your request test script will run. I know this seems complicated, but don't worry, mostly you will deal with the request itself directly. But it's good to know how this works in case you need to use folder level or collection level request. So to quickly recap, you're using script to allow you to add dynamic behavior to your request and collection by executing the JavaScript code. So like I said, this dynamic behavior can be anything, either that's setting your parameters or setting some variables or getting some data, or as well as verifying the actual test response. Alright, so I hope you have a decent understanding of what Postman scripts are and why we need them. I didn't want to make this video too long, so in the next video, we will go over how to create scripts in Postman. If you enjoyed this video guys, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Also, make sure to check out automationbro.com, where you will get access to all my blog posts related to the videos I put out. You can also go to the blog over here on the navigation link, where basically you will see all the blogs that I've created so far. And what I would recommend for you guys is to subscribe to my mailing list so that you get notified for all the latest updates related to my videos as well as blog posts. I will add the link in the description below for that. That's it for this video guys. I will see you in the next one.